Ashes of Creation, what's been going on? Well, for the past few months, Ashes has been playable in its Alpha 2 state. Initially, they ran their Alpha 2 Phase 1 test from October 25th to December 20th, with servers being up for 3 days per week. This was more of a network and stability test though, and I covered it in a first impressions video a few months back. Currently, the game's in Alpha 2 Phase 2, which has 5-day server uptime, which is expected to last until May, when the game will then transition to Phase 3 with 7-day uptime, and we'll then see the game's full feature set slowly roll out over the course of the next year or so. I think for many people, including myself, the Riot MMO and Ashes of Creation are the two big Western MMOs that we're really looking forward to, that will hopefully breathe life into our rather stagnant MMORPG genre. I've been playing a bit of Ashes Alpha 2 in my spare time, but I really wanted to try out some of the classes at max level, so I asked Stephen if he'd be down for an interview, and to also boost some classes up for me to test, which you'll see in an upcoming video where I'll review the game's combat. It's been a long time since I last interviewed Stephen, so I hope you'll enjoy this little chat. So we're here today with Stephen, and it's been a long time since we've had a chat, isn't it?
I know, it's been a very long time. I don't actually know that we've ever done a format like this where we had, other than I think we had a live stream once, right? Didn't we have a live stream, I think?
Yeah, like, it's got to be 7 or 8 years ago when I first interviewed you, and the game's completely different nowadays, so you got something to play.
What life was that? That was too long ago. I don't remember.
Definitely a lifetime ago. So we've got a bit of an interesting format cooked up today. We're going to be dueling between the questions on various different classes.
Hey, you just took a pot shot at me. Unbelievable! Look at this. You're trying to pre-damage me before we begin.
You got to get every advantage I can get. I don't want you cheating with those GM powers. A lot of my viewers who watch the Ashes coverage are more casual viewers of the project who check in like 3 to 4 times per year. For those people, where would you say Ashes is right now in its development cycle?
I would say that we have entered the most pivotal stage of development, which is that to say, last year in October, we began our Alpha 2. And the Alpha 2 is, a stage of development where we are rapidly iterating on our core pillars and designs, and where we are also rapidly in production of expanding the world map. I would say probably like 70 to 80% or so of the core gameplay loops are present within the game, but I would say roughly like maybe 20 to 30% of content is in place, and that's what we're kind of moving towards implementing, is fleshing out those systems, introducing the story arcs and quests, filling out our artisanship systems, but the moment-to-moment gameplay, our combat, that's in a pretty representative state. And people can get a good feeling for what Ashes is going to look and play like from a combat perspective, as well as our primary, I think, loop, which is the ability to kind of build the world up through the node system, to elect mayors, to let them engage in trade and the collection of resources within the world, and moving those resources and generating gold, crafting items, and hunting animals, and making mounts and whatnot. Like all of those things are what we're right now testing with over 130,000 people within the Alpha 2 testing environment.
130,000 people have tried the Alpha 2 already?
Yes, yeah, 130,000 people. There's been a lot. And we've obviously hit a pretty high concurrency when we initially launched in the Alpha 2 in October of last year. That December, we saw upwards of over 6,000 people that were logged in on one Unreal server. For us, that's I don't know of any other Unreal Engine 5 game that's out that has hit that level of concurrency. So we're very proud of the backend systems we've built to facilitate a massive, seamless open world in Unreal Engine 5 with our custom backend layer. And we're continuing to solidify that to work on performance and optimization, as well as stability. And it's come a long way in the last few months.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the worries a lot of people had back when you first started developing Ashes. A lot of people were saying it's not a good engine for MMOs,
Yes.
but you was always saying that it can work if you make your own custom backend, right?
Well, that's the brilliance of an engine like Unreal, right? Is that there are parts of Unreal that you don't have to use if you don't want to use them. And of course, Unreal Engine isn't built out of the box to facilitate a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. So we always knew from the get-go that there would have to be a lot of legwork on our end to facilitate that. And our networking team, our engineers, have done a really great job in making sure that that's the case. And now we have a great foundation to build upon, because one of the tenets of Ashes has always been to put the massive back in massively multiplayer. And right now we have siege testing that's being done with our nodes, and that siege testing is being done with hundreds of players in an environment all vying for the destruction of a node, which is obviously a server-wide event that's going to be pretty climactic. So,
Duel number 1. Are you ready?
all right.
GL.
1. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Ooh,
I've got some nasty debuff on me.
Do I? What was that? Oh no! Oh,
GG.
Oh, that was so close.
You walked into my beam.
Man. Did I die? I
Good
died
fight.
terribly. That was a,
Wait,
that was a good
I've
fight.
still got walk mode on.
Oh,
I didn't realize it was toggle.
Oh,
All right, now
good.
into the juicy questions. So, obviously, like in a lot of my videos, I don't know if you're familiar with my pros and cons format, where like I'll play an MMO and I'll talk about the pros and cons. What would you say, in its current state, the pros and cons are for Ashes, in your opinion, if you was to review your own game?
That's a good question. What are the pros and cons of the game right now? I think obviously cons are that we're in a testing environment, right? A lot of people, they come into Ashes of Creation, and it can be a little bit misleading, some of the quality of the game, to make you kind of feel like it's in a more game ready state. But the reality of it is, there's a lot to come still in Ashes in our development, and so making sure that people contextualize what they're playing right now as a work in progress sometimes is lost on people. There's a reason why we chose to go with a development approach that's very transparent, and it allows us to iterate on things as we are building the game. And that's not commonly done for projects of our size, right? We've talked about that from the very beginning. Typically, you'll see a lot of projects, spend 100, 200, 300 million dollars on development, and MMOs can take upwards of 10 years to develop. I look at the recent launch of Throne of Liberty, such a beautiful game that they made, and that was over a 12-year development cycle, for a titan like NCSoft, which really knows MMORPG. Some of my most beloved MMOs I've played came out of NCSoft. And here we are as a brand new studio. We're now up to nearly 250 developers at the studio, creating Ashes of Creation, and we started from scratch, right? And that is something that I think, because of the quality of the world that we're constructing, a lot of people forget. So one of the cons is that the game can be a bit misleading in the visuals and give you an impression that it is a completed game.
Yeah.
It is very much not so. I would say one of the pros, however, is that we are rapidly iterating on things still, right? You can see changes that we implement into the game as a result of us, talking with our testers in a regular cadence. with them, every single month, every single day on Discord and in our dev discussions. And, our developers play the alpha with other people who are testing. We are actively engaged and in the community testing. And I think that's one of the pros. I think from a gameplay perspective, the moment-to-moment combat is strong.
True. Yeah.
And that's probably one of the most important things to get right. I feel like in an MMORPG, it is the most tactile, interfaced system within the game that you're regularly participating with every day, every moment, every minute. And we took a lot of time to get things right. I mean, I even asked you on occasion to author some private videos for our team to help them kind of focus on what it is that players within the MMORPG genre are looking for out of a combat system. And we really take to heart that approach of engaging with our audience to know the product that they want us to build for them.
Yeah.
And I think combat is a shining example of that.
Definitely. Like with Throne and Liberty, for example, the reason I stopped playing that game, despite really loving everything about that game, was the combat. It just wasn't good enough. And if you don't work on the fundamentals and heavily nail down the fundamentals, content doesn't matter.
3, 2, 1.
I think you had the same thought there.
Oh no.
Oh,
oh man, I did worse that time. I guess Peon's just that good, guys.
Mage is like the one class that I've played. It's gonna probably swing in the other direction in the next few duels because I'm gonna be going on classes that I've never played before. So, have you got a turtle you can spawn for me? Because my mount's quite fast. So I'm walking and then I'm having to slow down.
Like a bulldog.
Bulldog?
Like a Boston Terrier. Yeah, a bulldog.
I've never seen that mount in this game before.
There's something. The skeleton.
Fucking terrifying. It's like a zombie
that is
dog.
terrifying, dude. The rig must be messed up.
It looks like one of those undead models from WoW, where it's got like the mouth cut off and his tongue's hanging out. It's quite funny. Oh wait, his walking animation's a bit flopped as well. What is that?
Welcome to Alpha. Maybe that one's not ready yet.
So when I'm streaming Ashes, a lot of people come in the chat and they ask like, when's a good time to jump into the game? Usually I respond with Alpha 2 Phase 3, because that's when the game's going to have like 7 days uptime. What would you say if someone was to ask that question?
Yeah, I would say sometime into Phase 3. This is something that we've said, back leading up until Alpha 2. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are very much about the stability, optimization, performance, and Phase 3 was much more about like balance and content, questing, solo. Like, there's a lot of stuff there that Phase 3 is going to feel much closer to a game, completed game. If you're a casual viewer of Ashes, Phase 3 might not even be for you. Well, and partly the reason why we are doing this in a non-NDA fashion, right? Doing this in the open, letting people see this, is so that whether you have a key and are participating or not, you have the opportunity to comment on what you're seeing, right? To offer feedback to us, right? Making sure that kind of, we're answering the call of what players want to see out of like Ashes. And I think that when we talk about like, what percentage of the player population is interested in, accompanying game through development, it's a very small percentage of people. Like, watching a game develop, participating in a game's development is not something that the majority of players really either have the patience for, the desire to participate in, um, or the capability of even offering feedback in a format that's directional for development.
Especially for MMOs, right? Because I feel like humans can't comprehend such long time frames, especially when it comes to development of MMOs. Kind of messes with our heads a little bit.
Absolutely. Like, I can tell you from a development perspective, like, this is not a process that most people can really be a part of. Like, being an MMO developer is not something that most developers, I feel, can be. So it takes a special breed of even developers to want to go through the pain. Like, maybe we can fight some of these enemies here.
Yeah, like the average MMO development time's like, for a non-ambitious MMO, it's like 5 years, right? On the low end.
Yeah.
But for an ambitious MMO, you're looking like 7 to 8 years at times. So as a developer leading a project, surely your mindset might even change over the course of that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You lose motivation.
Well, it's also, one of the important things about the development of any project, of any, whether it be a game or any other project, is vision keeping, right? Through that time, I'm sure many of us have seen projects that started with an idea, with a vision, that didn't last past the first year, or made it 3 years into development, and now the identity of the game that you were making has fundamentally changed to even appeal to a totally separate audience.
Yeah.
A lot of us have seen that with some MMOs that we've been looking forward to that turned into some like MMO survival hybrid, right? And a lot of MMO players are like, wait a minute, if I wanted a survival game, I'd play a survival game. I want something that looks, feels, talks, and tastes like an MMORPG, but is new with appealing, innovative concepts and ideas. And the longer you go in a project, which is something inherent in MMOs, the more opportunity there is to lose sight of that vision. And unless you have a strong vision holder that's keeping the project true to what it set out to be, there's a real risk and opportunity there to lose sight of vision.
Just to follow up on that, obviously, you wrote like the plan for Ashes many years ago.
Correct.
Has anything really changed? Have you changed your mind on anything since going into Alpha 2 and getting all of this feedback?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't changed our mind about the core tenets, the pillars of the design, the identity of the game, but within systems, we've absolutely changed systems. I mean, we were talking about combat there for a little while. Like, combat is something that has changed iteratively and fundamentally over time, but has never changed the vision of what we're trying to deliver. So like our original combat that we implemented, in Alpha 0 time is a completely different thing than where combat is today, like fundamentally. And even in Alpha 1 where combat was fundamentally different. Remember, we did APOC as an action combat testing environment as well. Fundamentally different combat experience. So, that isn't just true for combat. That's true for a lot of different systems.
Yeah. Okay, round 2. Never played the Ranger before, though, so you should be winning this.
I'm going to use like line of sight to break up your attacks. Just kidding.
Oh my.
Got him!
I'm no game dev, but my assumption with game development is the thing that takes the longest amount of time is like laying the foundations of the game, the stuff that the community doesn't see. So getting the networking right, figuring out the combat and stuff like that. And I would assume that things like art assets, biomes, and things like that would be more quick to develop, like the content side of things. Is that assumption correct? Has Ashes finished laying the foundations? And if not, what is left to implement on the foundations before players start to see content being released at a more rapid rate?
Yeah, I think that is for the most part, generally true. Anytime you're dealing with complex, feature development, the the initial stages, excuse me, the initial stages of prototyping, of iterating, building, those features from the ground up, and pre-production for defining those pipelines and um, you know making sure that what you're wanting to build is, oops, gosh, ancients. Sorry, part of this guy real quick. That can definitely be very, very time consuming. And I would say, like, the position that we're in right now with Alpha 2 is that the majority of those core features. Oh my gosh, look at this dude. What is going on?
It's going hard on that
Yeah,
grind.
that guy. Whoa. Very cool. I would say that we had definitely some reset on systems when we moved from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. That was particularly true when it came to the map of the world as well. But now we're in a position where we are filling out these systems with content. These core gameplay loops have gone through their a large portion of their iterative phases. They've gone through their prototyping phases. We have our established pipelines. And so a good example of that is, the expansion that we've done, the desert. That whole peninsula, if you open your map and go down to kind of that section of the sand squall, that whole peninsula between the month of January and February was introduced, and was fleshed out. And even the rogue archetype, as we kind of have the rogue archetype coming online comparatively, that's been kind of a 4-month, 3.5-month or so process to bring the rogue archetype up to a place where the other archetypes are at. And those other archetypes took a little bit longer because we're still answering some questions. And people will see that the summoner, the last archetype that we're introducing, will be implemented probably in about a 3 to 4 month time frame as well.
Okay.
So that's a very true statement to say, like, now that we've established these pipelines and these core features, filling them out from a content development perspective is a much more known, understood, and developmentally solid approach. I would say that is true. Now,
So-
if we have to re-examine a core system, and we have to, take into account something that we learn out of this Alpha 2 that makes us question whether or not a system needs to be fundamentally redrawn up, that's going to take time to do. But so far, we haven't seen.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, on the foundational side, what would you say is left to be done before it's like full focus on content?
Yeah, I think that there's still some outstanding feature development that's necessary on artisanship, right? We have the artisanship skill trees and professions that we still need to flesh out. We've decided to take a more active approach in those abilities. Originally, our design was to be more passive in the skill trees for our professions, and instead we've decided to incorporate active abilities as part of those profession skill trees as well. So things that you can do while you are, gathering and or processing or crafting. Um, that's going to be a big part that's still outstanding.
Yeah.
Same is true for our freehold feature. Right now, we have a very MVP version of freeholds implemented within the game. These are homes that you can purchase and that you can, place and plant resources on and gather those resources. We have the estate and barony system feature that needs to be implemented. It's in the process of being implemented, actually, and tested on a lower branch. That allows players to free place and deploy freeholds within the world to carve out their stake of land as we've designed. And then that falls under the purview of some barony and or some estate system, which then plugs into the node, vassalship system and taxation and whatnot.
Yeah.
I would say that additionally, when we talk about some of the outstanding features for vassalship itself, the ability for nodes to establish these kind of state-like entities when it comes to falling into this vassalship network structure, setting up the trade alliances and policy work and relics. Relics are currently in the process of coming online. Excuse me. Sorry.
It's all right.
Relics are still in the process of coming online. These are kind of trophies that you search for in the world. There are a limited number of them. Nodes vie for these things. They give special powers to nodes and the citizens of those nodes. And they're one of the main incentives for why players would want to attack a city, destroy that city, so that they can claim its treasures and property.
Yeah.
So that's a system that is currently in development and coming online as well. And then in March, this month, at the end of this month, the Rogue is hitting Alpha 2. Node Sieges are hitting Alpha 2. And an expansion within the Turquoise Sea that's probably going to include some naval elements to it as well, design-wise.
Nice.
That is another big feature set that is outstanding that we need to incorporate as well. So, phase 2 was kind of about touching up the final parts of the features that, the big feature points that we're trying to implement into Ashes. And then in phase 3, we're flesh them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a massive game with so many different systems and features. It sounds like there's still quite a lot of work to do when it comes to figuring out and implementing the foundational systems. But I see like a lot of people, they get hung up on things like the amount of biomes in the world, the amount of quests, the amount of stuff which probably just doesn't take that long, the amount of content. It seems like the real stuff goes on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, I would say, we're talking about biome zone development and questing. Those are all content paths that, are the tools are in place that we have for them. We're developing those in the back end. A lot of those systems are turned off for now because they have bugs. They have to go through QA testing before they hit the population. And that's something that, we consider relatively easy to implement, right? The difficult things are the complex features and systems, that we're trying to land the look, the feel, the gameplay experience for. And a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned is partially developed on our development branch in Perforce and in our QA branches and feature branches. And they need to be further tested, fleshed out, connected, and working with our mesh network layer approach so that they work cross-boundary also, which is another constraint that has to be done in development as well.
All right, ready?
Go. Oh no!
Broken
Here,
class. So I get a lot of questions when streaming regarding the graphics of Ashes, and I've always assumed that graphics would be one of the last things that you really touch up and refine in development. For the people who aren't currently happy with the state of Ashes graphics, can they expect to see any further improvements closer to launch? And is there anything with the visuals that you're personally currently unhappy with?
The thing about our development process has been, and people can, go to our YouTube channel and look at, where the game has moved to visually over time. And it's something that's, always being worked on, right? And I want to make sure that we distinguish between, what style is and what graphical fidelity is, right? Because they're two different things. Ashes goes more towards a realistic style, right? We're not a highly stylized game. We don't have a lot of heavy saturated colors and, whimsical, designs that are just exaggerated, right? We try to be more on the realistic side, not ultra realism, but a bit more on the realistic side. So if we're looking for like signature style within the game, that's something that's going to be introduced over time as we continue through phase 3. That might be like a race of, of like Sherpas that assist in managing warehouses or opening gates for people, stuff like that. Or it's our trees, the heartwoods that exist within the node proper, because of glint and the accumulation of this, magical physical property. So from a style perspective, you'll see more signature fantasy elements get introduced over time within the story. From a graphical fidelity standpoint, a lot can be said for lighting within a game. And we are actively going through iteration on our lighting across all environments. This is especially true with interior spaces and our time of day system. And as that lighting changes, you're going to see significant, visual changes within the world, within the way that lighting interacts with certain types of materials and textures. So that's something that I think is still very much outstanding. We have a great lighting team, that worked on Hogwarts Legacy and other, big, what I think are very good examples of lighting. That's Chris and Gabe and our graphics engineers, Philip and Peter and Cody and McPee. Like, they're all part of our lighting team that are, helping to kind of embrace the strengths that Unreal 5 on the front end has with Lumen and with the world. So there's a lot of changes and work that's being done there still. So I would say keep on the lookout for that. But there are parts of the world that are just beautiful, like the scene that we're looking out at, this massive open world, or in the desert environment. And the Turquoise Sea is going to be something, when it lands this month, that is visually very different from the Riverlands. So keeping in mind, like, the visuals of a playable space within Ashes is also predicated on the biome in which you're observing the world. The Riverlands can be kind of dreary, right? From your old country where you hailed from, to a degree.
England.
Exactly, right? But as you move out into the Turquoise Sea or the Anvil Mountains or in the Junedark, or the Sandsquall Desert, like, you start getting out of this Riverland space. It can look very visually different, very contrasty to what you're experiencing here.
Yeah, that's true. I've noticed that in different seasons and at different times of day, the lighting definitely makes a huge difference. For me, the one area that seems a bit weak right now is the winter season at nighttime.
Oh yeah, winter at night for sure. Yeah. Right now it looks like we're. In fact, I could change the season for you if you want to. Let me go to that. Let me go to your winter season real quick here.
The players who are testing the alpha are going to be a bit confused if you can just do that.
Oh, just get ready.
What the hell?
In global chat, they're going to be like, "What just happened?" It went to winter. Let me know when it hits your screen, because I just pushed the time update to the server.
I'm going to open the chat and see if there's any reaction. Shout out to the no-lifers in the chat in EU who are up super early. It's got to be like 6 a.m. EU time.
So yeah. This is, obviously, visually the seasons are, relevant to kind of, changing the visual appeal of a playable space, right? Keeping it a little bit fresh, right? But mechanically, it affects the crop rotations. It affects the resources gatherables within the world. It it informs certain types of mob spawners as well, which affects obviously loot reward tables. So from a dynamic world perspective, this system-driven event is influencing player activity.
Yeah. This is going to look a lot better when the lighting is fully in place. This isn't the final graphics at all. It's not the final. Yeah, let's go.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, I love that ability. Big damage.
Oh no.
Ooh, that feels cool. What's this? Oh, that's cool. It's my first time playing the warrior. Wow.
Oh shit, dude!
The fighter is nice. I mean, I was just spamming abilities, but that feels cool. Also, a graphics-related question, just to follow up on that. A common complaint I hear about Ashes on stream is that the game is lacking in art style. Are you planning on giving the game more of a distinct visual art style later in development, and is this something that's actually possible to do?
Yeah, I touched on that just a little bit when we talk about when we talk about the art style of Ashes. Our focus is more on the realism side than it is on heavily saturated colors or highly exaggerated shapes, right? So we're not going to be a World of Warcraft environment
Yeah, of
when it
course.
comes to the visuals of the game. That won't change. But if we're talking about like signature fantasy themings, if we're talking about like iconic style that we can point to and say that's Ashes, of creation, I recognize that. Those elements will be coming online as we continue down the content creation path towards prop sets that are uniquely identifying of different player factions and NPC factions in the world. We may introduce elements of like high fantasy type characters as assistant NPC races within nodes within playable environments. Obviously, we have a wide range of mounts, that exist within the world as well, that are signature, style as well. When we get into different biomes and we see unique foliage types, or in the desert, you have unique like those pink trees that are in the desert location, or the large crystals that are incorporated into the rock faces. Like those types of fantasy elements are going to be more pronounced as we continue to refine the world and grow the.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's fair. I think when people say that the game is lacking in art style, that's what they mean. They want to like look at a screenshot and be able to say this screenshot's from Ashes of Creation, rather
For
than
sure.
not being too sure what game it's from. I think that's probably where most people stand on that. And additionally, I think it's also possible. It's not, when people talk about art style, it doesn't always mean like super stylized like WoW. I think you can
Correct.
have a realistic art style and also be distinct. Like Black Desert
Yeah.
Online, for example, that's more on the realistic side of things, and you can look at a screenshot from that game and instantly tell it's BDO. I think
For sure.
there's a few games like that. Maybe New World as well is a good example.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
there are signature fantasy elements
yeah.
that are incorporated, right, and that can give it that distinct visual. And that's something that's definitely on our art team's like plans to incorporate as we do second, third, fourth, and fifth passes for these environments, incorporating narrative structures, the quest structures, the prop sets. As we build out and continue to grow the world, you'll see that those signature fantasy stylings be more pronounced. 3, 2, 1.
Ooh, spin to win a little bit. Lethal blow. Oh, what's
Go to
oh,
sleep.
we've slipped me.
Sleep.
Oh no, you're in the GG. I'm sure you will remember this, but 6 years ago, you posted a dev diary talking about the node system tool that allows for modular procedural cities that feel unique. Right now, there's only like 2 or 3 different node layouts in the game up to stage 3. In total, if the intention is for no 2 identical nodes, then Ashes of Creation would need 510 different node layouts across all node levels. And that's not even considering the racial building variance. Can you talk about how you can achieve this level of node variation? And is the procedural nodes tool still being developed? If so, at what phase of development can we start to see it being tested in game?
So the node tool has taken a few different iterations since that video that we talked about 6 years ago. The existing node tool right now works off of a cork system that allows kind of the, the dynamic changing of the landscape and terrain that the node proper sits on from a footprint perspective. We ran into some complications from that particular design probably about 4 years ago, and we did a little bit of a different approach. Going back to your question about defining the fundamental, production paths, that was a good example of one where we had this approach for the node tool, and we had to rewrite that approach for that node tool. And the reason for that was because there are certain siege constraints and considerations that unfortunately were not being adhered to with a highly proceduralized tool within the node proper, creating an unequitable amount of siege tactic considerations for that tool's implementation. So as a result, we've kind of redirected the tool to a more cell-based approach, which will take into account these kind of node layouts as you described them. Right now we have 2 that are implemented in game. We have what we call the Winstead node layout, and we have the Miraleth node layout. And the node tool facilitates the design team and the environment team to populate many different types of node layouts. And we define, spaces where buildings exist within the node layout tool, but we maintain the basic siege constraints and requirements even within each of those node layouts. And that exists on a node template. And the template relates to the cork, right? This is a cork that could live on the side of a peninsula, on the edge of a cliff, with a river running through the middle of it. Whatever type of geographical feature is part of the cork design, that's the template in which the layout exists upon. So right now our focus has not been visual diversity for these nodes.
Yeah.
It has been more around the fundamental core mechanics of the node structure.
Functionality and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're okay with living with, samey kind of node structures within the world, because really the node game is focused around specialization, building types that you construct and services that get offered as a result of those, specialization choices. And as the relics come online, and as our policies come online for mayors to interact with and players to vote on, like those types of systems, the guts of the systems development is what makes the game very interesting. And complementary to that are the visuals, right? Are the layouts and designs. So we have the tool from a production standpoint in place and ready to facilitate lots of different layouts and lots of different designs. But our focus has been to continue node progression. Right now, we're working on node stage 4, which is a town stage. And that's all about developing the building sets for the town. And it's all about developing the unique building types that can be constructed to facilitate those specialization of services. And then we'll get around to making sure to author additional node layouts so that we have a wide variety of visual representation of these nodes. The other thing to keep in mind is that the layout is one thing of it. The other side of that coin is also the building sets that are used, meant to reflect the culture. Yeah. So right now we only have the Kalar culture being represented within the game, which again contributes to that samey look. But once we've established the node progression to higher levels, that's when the environment team goes back and likely will outsource some additional prop development and building set developments to represent those different cultures that will sell a more distinct visual identity for these spaces also.
That makes sense. So basically the priority has been on functionality rather than the visuals, because I've seen a lot of people kind of worry that the game will never release because they've been looking at, there's only like 2 node layouts, and then they've been projecting that out to the game will be done in 15 or 20 years purely based off that.
Yeah, no, it's all about like answering the most difficult questions first.
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about the priority of development, we have limited resources. Even though we're a team of nearly 250 people right now, comparatively to the size of the project, that's not a lot of these projects get built by 500, 600, 700, member teams, right? And we don't have a multi-billion-dollar corporation footing the bill for this development. We have an individual, and then we
Yeah.
also have, our pre-orders from our alpha key sales as well, that are that are building this game. So we want to prioritize functionality and game systems design over the visuals because those are the hardest questions to answer, and they also inform the other.
Yeah.
So, from a foundational perspective, those questions first must be developed. And then we have our pipeline in place now to slot in new content. That new content being new layouts, new buildings, everything that goes along with what you're describing.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, once all of the functionality has been figured out up to the maximum node level, then you can start. Then making the node variations would be a relatively simple process. Is that what you're saying? That's actually not the difficult part. The difficult part is getting the engine in place, for example.
That's right. Defining the pipeline and getting the engine in place. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misconception or like a misunderstanding sometimes with players when they look at MMORPGs. We judge the progress of an MMO based on what we can see in game, because a lot of us don't have a lot of knowledge on the back end. So we'll look at things like how many biomes are there, how many different node layouts in relation to the maximum amount are there, and we'll judge an MMO's progress that way. It's more out of just being uninformed more than anything and not really understanding how development goes. So that's good to hear that there is progress on that front.
Yeah, and part of this is also like the as a member of the audience, as a member of the MMORPG community, like it's an unrealistic expectation to expect that a group of players are going to fully grok like the development process, right? And we can't always explain everything that goes into the decisions around the creation of of the game. We try to be we try to be as transparent as possible in talking about that development. Gosh darn it, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
But as you described, like there is a rhyme, there's a reason, to why we're doing the things that we do. And most of the time, it's because we want to answer the difficult questions first. The production requirements are usually the easy part. The developing more buildings, the developing more layouts. Once you've seen one or two, now that pipeline exists. We can create multiple. It's just a matter of allocating resources towards that. And those resources now are still allocated towards the more difficult questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really answered my question. That's also given me a better understanding of how the development works. I'm not expecting to win this Bard duel. It looks like a class you need to spend a bit of time on. I'll do a CC. CC? Almost got done. Do you have any plans on speeding up the XP rates in alpha time anytime soon, considering that the intended leveling experience isn't implemented into the game and players are mostly just mob grinding?
When I think about that question, I think about the purpose of the test. And from a testing perspective, we have our PTR, which is our private test realm. That's accessible to all Alpha 1 participants. And we will expand that group to include pre-order holders, the pre-order packages that we've released in the past. The Alpha 2 participants will gain access to PTR at some point in the future as well. And on that environment, we constantly are wiping the servers, and we have vendors that sell free, gear, all the gear types and mount types, and experience scrolls to max level, so that our testers can quickly test things before we wipe that server and test it over and over again. But the Alpha 2 environment is intended to be a more soak related environment test, right? Where, we want these systems to soak over time. We want players to go through that leveling process, so that we can catch, identify, and get bug reports for a lot of these things. So on the Alpha 2 realms, it's unlikely that we will do something different than that until
Okay.
we come up against a period where we might wipe the servers for the next phase. In that situation, then in the final weeks, we might do something along those lines, where we introduce unique behaviors or activities. Take a cough drop here. Where we do unique activities or behaviors, and kind of let our hair down, so to speak,
Yeah.
on the prod environment.
Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of ask that question because they want to just test the combat of the various classes.
Fair.
Kind of
Totally
makes
fair.
sense, yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Maddening dance.
Oh, no.
Doing some damage. Shielding dance myself. Shielding dance. Okay. Slide away. Big damage. Discordance. Oh, we're slept. That's not good. I don't like that.
Oh, no.
Ah, good fight.
Oh, that was so close. I was down to 500.
So you started this journey with Ashes as an entrepreneur with no dev experience, and over the past 8 years, you've built a really large studio at this point, and you jumped headfirst into the world of game development. When you started out, is this how you visioned how things would go? And what has been your biggest setback so far during development?
That's a great question. When I set out, did I expect this? I don't think I did.
Is it harder than you thought, Stephen?
Oh my God, dude. It is much harder. It is much harder than I thought. First of all, I will say, I did go into this experience eyes open, meaning I knew that I was signing myself up for something very difficult. And I don't think that I knew exactly how difficult it would be, but I knew that it was going to be the most difficult thing that I had done in my life. And not because, game development is any more difficult than any other profession out there, but because I was walking through the crucible doing the most difficult thing without any experience. And I knew that I was going to have to catch up in a much faster pace and in a very different way than anybody else who's gone through this process likely had to do. I think my story is pretty unique in that sense. And not to toot my own horn, but I'm very impressed with both the progress, the quality of the team that we've built, the community that we fostered, and the experience that we have right now in Alpha 2. Like, this isn't the finish line by any means, but it is a culmination of a lot of years of hard work. And I think that what is most satisfying about that journey so far is that from a vision perspective, we've stayed relatively true to what we've initially set out to do all those years ago. That in and of itself is a difficult thing to do for anything, let alone game development. So, I will say that I wouldn't exchange the choices we've made about our transparent development process, our engaging with the community, the lifelong friends that I built at the studio, within the industry. Like, I am a gamer at heart first and foremost, and there is no better dream of mine than to be in a position where I can effectuate the creation of a project like Ashes of Creation, because it is a beautiful thing when it comes together. The hard effort work of people who share a passion for something that you care very deeply about, which is MMOs in general, right? MMOs have a very special place in my heart because they are formational. They have been formational in my upbringing as a person. And I think there are many people within this genre that share that sentiment. So, what was the second part of your question?
What was the biggest setback you had to overcome during development? Sounds like that
I
node
think
tool
that
was a bit of a setback.
that was no, that was nothing
No?
comparatively to some
Okay.
of the stuff. Yeah, that was nothing. That wasn't a problem at all. The biggest setback, I will say that the most difficult part of this process, which also coincidentally is the most rewarding part of it, has been the open development process.
Mm,
Uh, I think that there are many strengths that come along with having the ability to engage with players early on and throughout the course of development. You can test thoughts, you can test theories, you can test designs, you can test implementation. You can get people who are very excited and very passionate and who want to be helpful help along the way, and it is instrumental. But there are also the other side of the sword, which is the people that doubt, or the people that try to take away from what we're trying to accomplish. And when you're managing a team of very passionate individuals whose efforts aren't because game development pays the best, it doesn't, shocker. But what it does pay the best in is the feels, the ability to watch something that you have poured yourself into be handed out to an audience who you care about, and to sometimes have a bit more abrasive interactions than is helpful in that process, and not for lack or for reason of effort in trying to explain the process, but just because as a community we've been shit on so many times in the past,
mm,
and we're a bit jaded as a
very
result of
jaded.
that. Which is okay. I mean, it
Yeah.
is it is what it is, right? I've always said that, um, you know, anytime you look at Ashes or any project that's in development at any stage, you're looking through a keyhole at a moment in time. And the great thing about this transparent process is you can go back and look at that keyhole in 2017, 2019, 2021, and you can see very different places where this project was at those times. And now imagine over the course of the next year or 2 years, how much further we will be from where we are today. This right now, Ashes of Creation, is the worst you will ever see it going forward. It will continue to improve. And it's going to improve because of the efforts that the community puts in when it comes to providing feedback and how to course correct, make changes, how to iterate, and create the remainder of Ashes. Um, like I said, over the course of January and February, we've introduced the entire peninsula of the Sandsquall Desert. In March, we're going to introduce the Turquoise Sea. In April, we're going to introduce the June Dark. In May, we're going to introduce the Anvils. Like the continent, the first continent will be near completed from a landscape foliage and gatherables perspective, you know, probably around the halfway point of this year.
Bloody hell.
That is a rapid advancement in development.
I
To
mean,
your point,
just to put
yeah,
that into
go ahead.
context, the size of these places, that would be the equivalent of like a massive half-year update in a fully released MMO, right? Like like a big quarter update in a full production MMO, and you're knocking these zones out. You'll be knocking them out month on month. So things are
Yeah,
really
I mean
ramping up.
the first continent, I think the entire first continent is something like 700 or 800 square kilometers, something around there.
Yeah, and I remember
Like,
back in January, people were complaining about the desert, but you very quickly, like the past 2 months, you've been hammering that out. So it seems like, back to what I was saying before, the things that players see, like the actual content of the world, the biomes, the assets, that is relatively quick to develop. Like we were saying earlier.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is already developed, right, on our lower streams, on our lower branches.
Oh, so there's even
And
more
it
of the world that you've got.
there's a
Brilliant.
lot
Okay.
there's a lot that's been worked on over the course of a period of time, and it has
Oh,
to go through the proper QA channels. It has to be properly implemented within the world.
so we only see
But
a
regardless,
fraction of
like,
what you've got.
yeah, and that's generally true, I would say, of most projects that go through open development, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're open development, things have to be in a position where the players can interact with them, and have it be somewhat stable.
Yeah.
We have stability issues, we have bugs. There are plenty of bugs within the prod environment, but we're one team. So we don't have a separate live ops team that's focused on live ops issues. We juggle and balance between our forward-looking, development team and our current need for the bugs that are within the testing population. And that's a constant, tug and pull between let's address the bugs now and make the, playable, testable experience better versus stay focused on the outstanding feature work and development work that needs to be implemented on a cadence that we know, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a constant struggle. So, to go back to the original question real quick, I wouldn't change the transparent development process at all, right? I wouldn't change it at all. But it has been the most difficult part probably of this journey, which is, ensuring that people have an accurate representation of what we're trying to accomplish so that we preserve that unique environment to collect player feedback, and it's not sullied, by a misrepresentation of the project in its current form. Now, with that being said, for people that want to wait and see how the project turns out over the course of the next, period of time from now until launch, that's perfectly fine. That's we know that development is not for everybody. We will be there, ready and able to show what Ashes of Creation has accomplished when that launch day comes, and those people will have an opportunity to, look at the fruits of our labor and say, is this a game that appeals to me? And it might not.
Yeah. Fair.
And we know that.
I can imagine the open development has also been hard on you personally at times, because if I put myself in your shoes, like, you've obviously funded this game massive amounts of money. If I was in your shoes and people was to critique the game as heavily and call it a scam, if I put in that much of my own money, not that I have that, of course, but I'd be quite annoyed. I'd find that quite hard to deal with. So I think you deal with
Yeah.
that quite well.
It definitely, I will not lie and say that it doesn't affect me, like, at a personal level. I think it definitely gets to me to a degree. However, with that being said, I am a relatively competitive gamer, and
Yeah.
I have said some shit in in the games I've played, and I've had some shit said to me. So I've developed a relatively thick skin.
That's good. Well, you're
And
a
it's
Dota
it's
2
it's
player, so
I am a Dota player. I can handle some level of toxicity that most gamers probably can't. However, my perspective has always been that, you're not going to control, that kind of narrative during development, and there's no point in trying.
Yeah.
People will formulate opinions based off of hearsay and bullshit, and that's all good. It is what it is. The game will speak for itself when launch day comes.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's going to appeal to a certain group of people. That's cool. We know that. We've made very specific decisions around PvP and PvX and, the stylization, that is just not going to be for everybody. And we know that. We're not trying to build a game that's for everyone. What we're trying to do is to build a game that answers, these three things. A dynamic world that responds to players' actions and decisions. A company that upholds, well, excuse me, I'll go down with this one. A company that upholds the integrity of the players' activities in the world and doesn't undermine it with predatory monetization practices for pay to win or pay to convenience things. And lastly, a group of people that interact with their players, listen to what they want, and change the game based off of that feedback. Like those are the core tenets of us as a company, of me as an individual. And so long as we achieve that, we are going to appeal to some level of that market share. 3, 2, 1.
Oh my. So finally, what's the thing that you're most excited to see the community reaction to with Ashes before the end of 2025? Have you got something you want to tease to us, or what are you personally most excited for?
I am excited to see probably two things. I'm excited to see monster coins,
Okay.
which are players interacting with the the monster coin system. They can inhabit NPCs, and they can interact with other players as those NPCs during certain events. We have some basic functionality of that in place. I turned into a actually here. Let me.
Yo. Okay. That's cool.
So this is one of our raid bosses, and I can now I have been this raid boss in the past for some raids that we've done.
Yeah.
Let me see.
So would players eventually be able to control creatures like raid bosses like that? With the
Absolutely,
monster coin system?
super rare, but yes. And then they can progress within the monster coin system to unlock certain abilities for certain monsters based off of their success and progression.
Oh, is it like a skill tree kind of thing?
Yes, that's right. And they can get cosmetics based off of their successes with these, and these coins drop based off of certain events. So
That's
this guy's
crazy.
got a lot of careful, don't get zapped.
So I'm guessing they'll have like get wrecked.
Oh no, you got zapped. I'm sorry.
I had the UI off. So I guess these monster coins will have different rarities. This one would probably be like a legendary, right? Because it's a raid boss.
Correct. That's right. Yeah.
And you got more common ones, which would be like normal mobs.
Yes, that's right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's correct. That's exactly correct. And then the other thing that I would say I'm looking forward to is sieges.
Sieges, yeah.
I think the acquisition of relics, those relics being then housed within the nodes, and other nodes wanting to take the relics that are scarce commodity essentially from other nodes, is going to create an interesting political divide within the servers that's unique to each server. And I think that's going to be something that's super cool. So watching players siege each other's nodes in order to vie for these scarce relics, I think is going to present some very interesting political intrigue on these servers.
It's going to be fantastic content as well, because every siege is different. You'll have different competitive aspects. I remember back when I played BDO, there used to be like a siege podcast after every siege, and people would tell their stories of each side of the war. So having that in Ashes is going to be something that I very much look forward to.
Absolutely.
So that's coming in 2025. That's coming this year, Sieges.
Sieges are coming, I believe, at the end of March, this month.
Oh, wow.
Now, the siege functionality will be present, but the destruction of the node won't come for another month or so. Probably another month.
So this is node sieges, not castle sieges, right?
These are node sieges.
Yeah, yeah.
That's correct.
And there is a difference between them.
The testing has been happening on our PTR environment.
Yeah.
So we've been having a few hundred players participating in these node sieges. And then once we have the node destruction event in place for the siege, which will probably come in a couple more months, that's when the siege, the node, if it gets destroyed, goes through a ruin phase. And the ruin phase is this like persistent rubble space where it's open PvP and people can go in and try to find loot predicated on the old node's warehouse and accomplishments.
Oh wow.
And they can fight over that loot as like an open battleground environment.
Yeah.
So it's a super cool idea.
Very nice. It's going to be cool to see these big unique features of Ashes coming together this year, see how it plays out.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, myself. Big judgment.
Oh.
Okay. Dealing some damage. Heal.
Oh. Oh no. There you go.
Okay.
You've gotten the hang of it so far. Oh shit, I'm not gonna be able to outdo it.
Smite. Pop a condemn. Oh, mobility. Self heals. I might be out of mana though.
I'm out of mana almost.
Might be an auto attack battle then. Whee!
There it is. Oh, I'm at 200 mana. Oh shit.
Next time we do an interview in the future, we're going to rematch in all these classes, and I'm going to learn how to play them.
I'm down.
Well, thanks for your time, Stephen. I really appreciate it. It's been It's been 8 years at this point since I first ever covered Ashes. I think it's gone fast, hasn't it?
I know, right? That time has flown by.
Yeah.
I can't believe you're an entirely different person than you were 8 years ago. You've leveled up now. I'm telling you, man, when you come here, we did 1v1 in the game, but when you come down to San Diego, we got to do like a 1v1 kickboxing match or something.
I'll teach you some Muay Thai. I'll teach you how to do a switch kick.
I'm ready. Just don't kill me. If you kill me, then the project might be in peril. No,
Yeah. Cool.
Oh,
thanks a lot.
All right, brother. I enjoyed it.
Cheers. I hope everyone's enjoyed the stream, and if you've got any comments or any questions you want to add, then leave it down below, and I'm sure Stephen will be reading the comments. He always does pretty much every Ashes video.
I totally do.
Yeah.
I'll be there to answer some questions. If you guys want to post any, feel free. I'll jump in there.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.